Hiya, Martin here. Thank you for joining me for this week's turning video. I hope you're all well and you've had amazing weeks and weekends in your workshops. Now this week's video is more concentrating on finishing rather than actual turning. And I had a question from John Horvath on last week's video regarding some finishing techniques I used ages and ages ago. And he asked for a little bit of clarification on it. So that's what I'm going to do, and it's about why I use an oil and sealer as well. Now the piece I've got on the lathe is, it's about 11 inches, something like that, and as you can see it's already been done. And this was a demo piece from the Makers Central event a couple of weeks ago, and a lady came up to me and asked if she could buy it. And I said yes, no problem, but it needs to be refinished. So this project and John's question are, they go hand in hand quite nicely together. And so I will just clean this off, recolour it, and talk you through my finishing process. And it will be finished with a lacquer for a change. So I'm going to speed through most of the colouring bit, and I'll come back to you when I'm ready to start applying the oil, and I'll explain the reasons why and what it does. So there's the bowl, cut back, sanded, coloured and ready for its finishing. Now John's question was specifically about my use of oil as part of my finishing process with sealer over the top. And the best way I can explain that is I use a drying oil, particularly Hampshire Sheen's food safe Danish oil, as part of the finishing process as an embellishment rather than a finish on its own. It's a drying oil, so it polymerises and it dries hard. And as you'll see in a second, it makes the grain pop, as all oils do. So over the top of the colour, I'm going to put a single coat, probably a single coat, of the Danish oil. So a single coat, and what you'll notice is that as the oil goes on, it makes the grain of the wood pop really nicely. But then we need to let it dry. Because there's a solvent in it, the solvent must have fully evaporated before we move on to the next step. You can do this step just with a sanding sealer if you want to. The sanding sealer will make the grain pop too, but I prefer to have the grain pop with an oil before I put the sealer on. And I can see that this wood is quite thirsty as it's sucking that oil in quite deeply. But then after the first coat, I'm just going to wipe off any excess. And with it done, I need to let it dry completely before I move on to the step of the sanding sealer. It's the morning after the oil went on, and just having a little feel of the piece and a little bit of a rub around, I can feel that the oil has gone off. It has dried, it has cured, which means I'm ready now for my sealer. And I'm going to use a cellulose based sealer, and in particular Hampshire Sheen's cellulose sealer. And having turned this piece before, I know that it needs probably 3 good coats of sealer before it'll be ready for its final finish. So I'm putting it on quite quickly because I want to get it on evenly without any blotches or smearing. Now I choose a cellulose sealer for the use with the intrinsic colours because, well, it goes off quickly, it dries quickly, it dries nice and hard, and it also takes a little bit of the colour off the surface, which for the colouring techniques I use is exactly what I want, because as I keep saying, I don't want to hide the wood, I want to show what's in the wood. So if I take a little bit of the colour off the surface, as you can see, it still stays a really nice depth of colour, and we can see all of the figure in the wood absolutely beautifully. Now that's the first coat on. Now bearing in mind that the oil also has a solid component too, or it dries solid, I should need less sealer on this than previously, so probably 2 coats will do. So I'm going to leave that for a few minutes to dry off, and then I'll be ready for the second coat. First coat of the sealer has gone off, and I'll just put on a second one. Now it's really important that you let the sealer dry before you start applying your final finish, whether that's a lacquer or a wax or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's got to be completely dry. Otherwise they'll dissolve the finish, which is absolutely what we don't want. The sealer's dry, and I'm looking at the surface of the piece, and I can see that the surface is sort of fairly even, and just to help clean it up a bit, denib it with some shavings, which should even off the surface even more. And now it's been denibbed, I'm looking at it again, and I can see that it's not quite as even as I would like. Just as it comes round, if you look at this reflection here, just as it comes round, it's not quite so shiny, which tells me that the surface is still a bit dull. So that needs a little bit more sealer to it before it will be ready to put the lacquer on. Because if I put the lacquer on now, the wood is going to start to absorb it and we'll end up with a slightly uneven finish. And then when that's done, it's worth protecting your tenon and also protect your chuck as well. And protect the lathe bed too. And I'm going to use Hampshire Sheen's brand new spray gloss lacquer. Right, okay, so I've just rigged up a very rudimentary headstock protector out of an old cardboard box. Now make sure when using a lacquer you've got plenty of ventilation, or you wear a face shield, or preferably both. So I've given that a good shake, and then about 20 to 30 centimetres away, so 10 to 12 inches, I'm just going to start applying a light coat of the lacquer. Now don't expect the lacquer to go on like glass straight away. It's going onto a very smooth surface, so it may well sort of orange peel a little bit. So that's the first coat, and also you don't want to put too much on. If you put too much on, it's going to start to run, and then you're going to have all sorts of problems when it comes to putting it right. 20 minutes later and we're ready for the second coat. So exactly the same as before. Got to be careful not to overcook it. Another 20 minutes passed, and so that's 2 coats on, and I've got a piece of 400 grit abranet, or sandpaper would do. And I'm just going to really lightly just take the top off the lacquer that's on there already. You don't want to take it all off, you just want to knock the top off just to start to even the surface out. Give your can another shake and go to coat number 3. Leave that for 20 minutes, put another coat on, sand it back like I did a second ago, and then repeat that until you've got 6, 7 or even 8 coats of lacquer on, and then leave it overnight until it's gone completely hard, and then you can come back the next day and polish it. Right, it's Tuesday morning. I've had to leave it for a few days because I was demonstrating in Cardiff on Saturday and I was teaching yesterday. So today's Tuesday and there are now, I think it's a total of 10 coats on there. I think I counted that right. It's either 8 or 10, one or the other. Now as I'm turning this round, you can see that it is really, really good. I'm so happy with how it's turned out. It's almost perfect. There are a couple of little pits or a few little imperfections in it, so it's not 100% smooth. A couple of extra coats would probably smooth that out, but I don't want to go any further with it. So I'll need to polish it. And to polish it, I'm going to use some Yorkshire Grit Original and Yorkshire Grit Microfine to polish it down to a point where it'll look like, hopefully, it's been dipped in glass, which will be a superb finish. Now this whole finishing process does take time, but it is worth it when you get it right and you spend the time and the effort and the attention on it. So I'm going to start with the Yorkshire Grit Original. So I'm putting enough of the grit on to cover the piece. And start the lathe fairly slowly, and I'm just going to work the product into the lacquer, just the same as you would do when using Yorkshire Grit on a normal piece. And I'm going to change to a cleaner cloth and just start to work the product off the bowl. Let's just have a look. Oh yeah, that's come up beautifully already. I'll spin the lathe up a bit just to take off the excess. Now you're going to need to change to a clean piece of towel fairly regularly when taking the excess off, so you don't start burning the product into the lacquer. Yeah, that's beginning to look absolutely super. Now I'm going to switch over to the microfine and repeat the process. That's come up absolutely stunning. The microfine has done an absolutely superb job. So now there's just one thing left to do, and that's turn off the tenon, or rather return. What am I saying? Recut the tenon so I can get it onto reverse mount it onto the chuck, so I can do the same on the inside. So I'm going to do that with a spindle gouge. That looks good to me. Not very happy. I've dinked it. So I'm going to cut it all off and do it again. So it's about 5 days after I dropped this piece, as you saw, and in between lessons and stuff and redoing it, I've been applying another few coats of lacquer, and it has turned out absolutely gorgeous. Really happy with the depth of the shine. I'm really pleased with it. So I've got to get it off the lathe now and turn the inside of the bowl. So I've put down an old smock. So if I do happen to drop it, because it is so smooth, it won't get damaged. So I'll just very carefully, got it. Right, it's now reversed and I've got it on a set of gripper jaws, and now I've just got to hollow out the inside. So this bit will be a musical interlude, so feel free to fast forward a couple of minutes to the end of this if you don't want to see some fast forwarded turning, and see you in a minute and we'll look at the inside. So there's the inside of the bowl, hollowed, sanded down to 600 this time. I normally only go down to 4, but I thought this time, what the hell. And it's had its sanding sealer on, which has been denibbed. And I have my Acme lathe protector on, just to protect the headstock and the chuck from any of the spray. So back to the lacquer. One. Now the last bit to do is to turn off the tenon. So I've got some kitchen towel here, that I'm just going to cover the rim with, just to protect it against the aluminium. Make sure it's all good all round, and then close the jaws. Now I don't want to do it too tight, and I don't want to do it too loose either. And I'm just going to give it a little push with my finger through the gap here, just to see if I can move it, which I can't, so I'm happy with that. And then tear off some of the excess towel so it doesn't get in my way whilst I'm turning off the tenon. So I'm happy that the bowl is secure in the jaws, and I'm going to take the spindle gouge and very carefully turn off the tenon. So I've brought the tailstock up just for a little bit of support, and then just take my time teasing off the tenon. So here it is, it's finished. I can't tell you how pleased I am to have reached the end of this somewhat mammoth project. It wouldn't normally take me quite as long to finish a project like this, but with lessons and demonstrations and, you know, making Hampshire Sheen and stuff in between it all, it has taken an inordinate amount of time. If I was to be doing this normally with 10 coats of a lacquer on the outside and 10 coats of a lacquer on the inside, I would expect it to take 3 to 4 days for the finishing, and maybe an hour for the colouring and all the turning and stuff. So, you know, getting on a finish as nice and as fine as this takes time, so don't rush your finishing. It's your finishing that's going to be looked at for years to come. So take your time and make sure it is as absolutely as perfect as you can possibly get it. So thank you very much indeed for watching. Down here are a few videos I think you may be interested in, and if you click on the bowl you can subscribe to my channel. Thanks very much, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.